Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Football Culture Podcast. We've done quite a few recent episodes on football in Spain, but we're going to broaden the topic for today's episode and speak a little bit more generally. Now, ground hopping is becoming a very, very, very popular thing. In fact, it's been very, very popular for a while. And I have a guest with me today who's had a lot of recent travel experiences. So I'm here today with Rob Potts. Rob, just introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I am a teacher. I work in Bradford, but prior to teaching, I was a sports journalist. So I worked for about 7 or 8 years full-time in sports journalism. And, you know, something I've always kept a hand in with. So even during the teaching career, I've still carried on writing and doing that regularly. I'm a Man United fan, so that'll probably alienate a good chunk of the audience, but I've been going to Old Trafford since I was knee-high, and I'm sports nuts. So as well as football, I've travelled all around the world watching all sorts of different sporting events, and I love that kind of combination between sport and travel and, you know, dipping into local cultures as well as experiencing the sport.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I don't think any listeners being a United fan, but they might set up a support group for you after the recording. The way things are going at the moment. Okay, so I believe you're in the process of writing a book at the moment, which is about football travel. What inspired you to do that?
Well, it's funny, I had my first book published, which was a teaching book. So unless you're struggling with, getting to sleep at night, it's probably not one I'd recommend. But that went out about 4 years ago, and it kind of gave me the inspiration to start writing more. So I wrote a couple of novels, and on one of the trips I did research, one of the novels, I went to Berlin, and Hertha were away and Union were away, but I popped to a game in the fifth tier. It was a Pokal game, actually, between Maccabi and Wolfsburg, and I absolutely loved it. And I've got an 18-year-old son, so he'd have been 14, 15 at the time, and he's football mad, and we just decided to start doing this together. So from there, we went to Lisbon, we went to Ajax, and people started commenting, gosh, you must be spending a fortune. Where do you find the money from? And, you know, the funny thing was, if you plan these things well in advance, you can do it on a shoestring. And from those conversations, it sort of planted a seed in my head. Why don't I start, working on a book where I can talk about how you can do this, but also how you can make it really affordable? And I pitched that to a couple of publishers, and one company I've admired for years anyway, got back to me, and they loved it, and we kind of tweaked the idea, and this is where we've ended up. So hopefully, all things being equal, April next year, the book will come out.
Okay, cool, good stuff. Well, we'll have you back before that's released to chat about that. Okay, so now a lot of people, I haven't done it so much in the last couple of years, but I used to, in the last 10, 15 years, do a lot of traveling and watching football as I was going along. So trips were always planned on getting to as many matches as possible. So a lot of people, like, when I tell them this, they're like, really? What, you've traveled to watch football? But the reality is, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that do it. I mean, I remember being in Germany at a station, and we bumped into 5 guys from Sweden who were doing exactly what we were doing, and they were going to the Borussia Gladbach match that we were heading to. So why do you think it is that people love to combine football and travel together? What's so, why is it they go together so well?
I think the thing is with sport, any sport, but particularly football, it really reflects the local culture. And I think if you really want to get to know somewhere, go to a football game. If football's not your thing, go to a rugby game. Go and watch, whatever sport happens to be playing in town. And I think you find far more about that local culture by engaging in sport, because you get to mix with the local people and you get to see what makes the place tick. I also think, obviously, being Brits, we're sports mad anyway. So I think any excuse to go and watch live sport, I don't think it's any coincidence that, whenever sporting events are awarded to the UK, they do tend to sell out. We are a nation of people who love to get out there and love to get to sporting events. So I think if you put those things together, really, you can understand why it's such an appealing thing for people to do.
Yeah. I mean, I started doing it. I mean, the first match I went to abroad was, I just happened to be on holiday with a friend. We were doing a walking trip along the Algarve. and we went to Ferenc versus Boavista in the Portuguese league in 2002. And my friend had been doing a lot of ground hopping for a long, long time, but he wanted to do this walk, but he Ferenc were at home at the same time, so we decided to go. Boavista at that time were the reigning champions of Portugal, one of only two clubs to have won the league title outside of the big three. That was an okay experience, but Ferenc are a small club. For Boavista, a relatively small club, the attendance was quite small. But the main one I went to that really got me the bug was a trip where I went to Borussia Dortmund and stood on the yellow wall. And then Bayer Leverkusen, which was a good experience. Probably not the best German one. There's better ones out there, but it was still much more enjoyable for me than English football. And Wuppertal Borussia, which is a fantastic little club if you get a chance to go there. And for me, comparing it to English football is what gave me the bug to do it, because I just felt at that time English football had become very, very sterile, and I was discovering it wasn't the case in other countries. I mean, how do you think the fan experience differs from, say, in England to, I don't know, any other club, any other country in Europe?
I think that's a really big factor, actually. It's something I should have mentioned earlier. I think you're right. Sterile's the word now. You know, I go watching Manchester United at Old Trafford. It's not the experience I used to get 35 years ago, you know, and I get that, you know, safety considerations. We've moved to all-seater stadiums. We're kind of pivoting back from that now. But I think the clientele as well. I think we've hit a point in English football, particularly in the Premier League, where the kind of traditional working class fan base, who were the lifeblood of the game, they've been culled, they've been squeezed out, they've been priced out of the game, and I think that's affecting the experience. You know, if you look at the Premier League now, you've got clubs dragging out tifo. Now, I love tifo. He's part of the kind of cultural fabric when you go to some countries, and it's a real experience when you see those amazing tifo. There was a great one that you'll have seen at Betis this year for the Grand Derby. That's fantastic, but the difference on the continent is the majority of those are fan-led. The fans do it. They're put together with love. The way it feels particularly in England, I can't comment as much for Scotland, but particularly in England, the way it feels in England is there's a sort of recognition from the clubs that they have priced out the traditional fans. And because they priced out the traditional fans, they're losing that atmosphere. And it's almost as if they're kind of sticking a few fairy lights in there to compensate for that. So all this club, I mean, I don't know if you saw the Arsenal one earlier this year. It was dreadful.
Yeah.
Just made me crunch. But it's not what TIFO's about. TIFO, for me, I've always seen it as an expression of affection from the fans, and the fact that the fans do that, and it's, you know, not regulated. That's what makes it special. The minute a club starts doing that professionally, and the club is regulating what goes in there, to me, it just loses all meaning. But I think that's where we're at with the game in England at the moment. It's you know, you got some grounds, it's more like got the cinema than it is going to a football ground. And obviously you go to Europe, in a lot of cases, it's a much more raw experience. But I think a lot of us who grew up with that experience, that's what we're there for.
Well, I think, it's like talking about the tifo, and I think the conference final was a good example of that. So Betis had this huge tifo of, an Andalusian warrior going into battle, wanting to bring back the trophy. And I think Chelsea's was just this kind of like little flag or something, or wolf. I can't remember what it said. It was something like, we'll follow you wherever you go. And it looked like the Betis fans had taken a month to put that together, whereas the Chelsea fans had taken them about an hour, to put it together. So yeah, they do. The ultras in Europe will spend, a long, long time making the tifos for the games. Mm. And you talk about atmosphere. I went to Bristol City versus Charlton the other week, and the atmosphere was dreadful. Despite Section 82, the Bristol City area ultras, if you like, they've made a lot of effort there. But I just think that everyone has become so passive in English football grounds that it's very difficult to drum that up.
Okay, yeah, so I go to Old Trafford, and there's a lot of debate, and you had guests on there a few months ago talking about this. There's a lot of debate over whether the stadium's fit for purpose, whether we should stay there, whether we should move on. My only thought of it is there are sections in the ground now in Old Trafford where I just actively won't go anymore. These parts of the Sir Alex Ferguson stand where it's just not an enjoyable match going experience. You're surrounded with people who are there for those kind of FOMO moments, which is probably a little bit hypocritical from someone who likes to travel to get grounds and likes to go to different clubs, but you're sitting amongst people who aren't engaged in the game. All we want to do is take selfies. You're sitting there, you're having to move 15 minutes before half time because they're going for the hot dogs. They come back 15 minutes after half time. It's losing what football used to be about, which was a game, not exclusively for working class people, but it was certainly a game that gave working class people that outlet to get out and, get away from whatever was going on in their lives. And I think we're getting so far away from that. And it's really refreshing when you travel around Europe and you see that actually that football culture that we had here in different forms, but it's still there. Yeah,
it's certainly the case that it's become diluted. I mean, you see it at concerts now, though, is like half the time people are taking photographs and filming the gig. I mean, I've done it a little bit, but not much, because it's kind of like, I went to see Kraftwerk about 2 years ago in Seville, and I didn't take one photo and I didn't film it because I just wanted to experience the gig. And I felt if I was I'm not really enjoying the tune if I'm filming it. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it becomes like everyone is trying to like, to film their life, to sort of remember like, a collage of what they've been up to, but are people actually experiencing it? And, this is often happening, at football. Now, in terms of, so you've recently been on a trip, to several countries. Where did you head to?
I think, and I could be wrong here, I think I did 9 countries in 18 days and visited.
So many you can't remember, yeah?
Yeah, it's one of those where I was, literally, one country, I went to Czechia, I was in there for 24 hours, in and out, caught the game, and then straight on the train to Slovakia. And the schedule was completely dictated by the football. I wanted to squeeze as many games in as I could in a small space of time. So all of my kind of coach transfers, train transfers, they were just to maximise the number of games. So Ferencváros was one of the clubs I went to see in Budapest. When their game was put back 24 hours, that just kind of shaved a day off the trip to Czechia. So that was a shame, but it was a brilliant experience. I think I got to 7 games, visited maybe 12 clubs, and it was really interesting doing it in a real condensed time period as well, because you got the real kind of contrast between the different experiences at different places.
Okay, so what matches did you see then?
So the first place I went to actually was Rome, and there was no game there. But when I was pricing the trip up, I was doing the maths, and I live in Leeds, and I worked out it was cheaper to fly from Manchester to Rome and have a couple of days in Rome than it was to get a bus down to Luton and fly straight to Belgrade. So that was a little bit of a no-brainer. So I went to Stadio Olimpico, had a look around there. There was no game, unfortunately, so I couldn't get to a game there, but it was still a worthwhile experience. The first actual game, though, was in Belgrade. I went to see Red Star play in Ulgosh, the third club in Belgrade. Now, you might be able to help me out here, James.
I only know Partizan, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was the other one anyway who brought... It looked as though they brought the away fans in a minibus, but that was a fantastic experience, really memorable. And what was interesting there, the stadium was probably a quarter full. Okay, so you've got the East Stand barely half full, if that. The South Stand, which is where the Ultras are, all of the Ultras were sort of condensed into one block. So it was an empty stadium. You've got this little kind of travelling army of away fans in the North Stand, just in a little block in the corner. But what was really interesting there was, even with probably 5,000 or 6,000 people in there, the atmosphere was brilliant. The Ultras there were just didn't stop all game. And it was culturally, it was I mean, this is what I talked about earlier, going to a place and learning about a place through football. Culturally, it was a really fascinating experience. I mean, if you go to Red Star's ground, they've got a tank there. there's murals there with all sorts of stuff, which, I don't speak Serbian and written the Cyrillic alphabet, but you could see that a lot of them were alluding to, the conflicts in the Balkans in the 90s. The one thing in English was UEFA supports war criminals. So it was a really eye-opening experience. There's one moment in the game, actually, where the ultras in the South Stand gave a chant, and then all the kids who were sat in the North Stand all replied. And I kind of, even not speaking Serbian, I worked it out, but I spoke to a chap behind me and I said, what they're singing? And the chant was, all the ultras shouted, Kosovo is, and then all the kids replied, Serbia. So you got a real,
This is the thing. I mean, it's just like football and politics. They football and sports shouldn't mix, or football and politics shouldn't mix. Football and politics go together, particularly not so much in the UK. Like, so for example, I remember a Betis ultra saying to me, West Ham fans are all right wing, aren't they? I said, well, no, not really. I mean, it depends on the person. Oh, no, they're the West Ham hooligans, they're right wing. I said, well, some of them might be, some of them might not be. It's not as political as it is in other countries, but a lot of other countries, it's attached to politics, and particularly in a region like that. And of course, Red Star was the team of the army, the Yugoslav army. So that's probably why the tang was there.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of interesting links as well. So if you go back to the Balkan War, if you remember Arkan, he was the one of the leaders of the Serbian militia. When he was a gangster turned kind of paramilitary. When he was putting together his paramilitary army, the first place he went to recruit was the Ultras groups. So Delizia, Red Star Ultras, that's where he went to recruit. Also picked up from where's not working, James?
Okay, don't worry.
He picked up some from Partizan as well, but he wanted these sort of young, probably aggressive men who could be molded into a militia, and that's where he went. So, these aren't positive things, but it does show you that there's that kind of link there between football and politics. In England, we don't have that same kind of direct link. You can't tell what football club someone's going to support which political party someone's going to support just through the football club. There'll be times, Liverpool, for example, you go into a city that leans very much to the left. So, naturally, a big chunk of the fan base are going to be left-leaning voters. But, amongst that crowd at Anfield, you're going to get conservative voters. You're going to get, and there's a bid for reform voters. So it's not the same direct link in this country as overseas. But to me, even when it's something that perhaps we're not comfortable with those politics, it just makes it more fascinating, and it just gives you that window into the society you're visiting.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention Orkan. I used to work with a guy in Manchester called Branny, and he was Croatian. He was a Croat, but he was a Red Star fan because he grew up in Yugoslavia when it was united. So, you could be Croatian and support Red Star because they were the big club of Yugoslavia. And he was telling me that he lived in Belgrade, and he used to go in the bakery, and there was a guy that worked in the local bakery who was also a Red Star Ultra. And he used to chat to him about the football and blah, blah, blah. I didn't really know him, but chatted to him about the football, and he's like, oh, he seems a nice guy, blah, blah, blah. And then the war breaks out, and it turns out the guy that was in the bakery was Arkan. He was working at the bakery, and he was talking to him every day. He knew him, and then he sees him on the news leading an army. So it just goes to show, the effect that war had on society in that area.
Even what you mentioned though with your friend who was Croatian prior to the war, there were lots of Serbians living all over Yugoslavia. There's a big Serbian minority in Croatia, and one of the things, if you were a Serb living in Croatia, you might not necessarily outwardly say I'm a Serb, but your expression of, your ethnicity or your nationality or whatever would probably come through the football club you supported. So you'd take a chance if you were an ethnic Serb living in Croatia, you'd express that by supporting Red Star.
So you had a bit of bother, I believe, with the ultras in Belgrade. What happened?
Well, I had a really great experience. I visited the ground before the game. I had a really good chat with the club historian there, who was a really interesting fella, and gave me lots of really good background information. And heading into the ground, I'd spotted there were a couple of ultras pubs there. So I thought I'll pop in, have a look, meet some locals, maybe if they're feeling talkative, which is not always when you meet ultras, maybe chat to them about the club culture. And I was wearing a shirt that I've made. So for the social media channels, I've had some shirts made for them out and about. And these 4 ultras in the corner were just kind of staring at me. And one of them came over and broke in English, "You can't wear that shirt, you have to leave." And I was, I'm explaining it's not a club shirt, it's my social media channel. And these guys were getting more and more kind of progressively aggressive during the whole time. There's one guy who looked like he was a nightclub doorman who they're kind of settling him down and sitting him down. And the smaller guy just kept coming over with his phone and would speak into it in Serbian and then pass it across the table. And it'd become more and more kind of aggressive. "You need to leave now." So I took the hint, drank a pint and left. And then when I came back in the evening for the game, I made sure I just wore black just to avoid any other confrontations. But yeah, all part of the experience, all, really interesting.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, if you go to watch football in Argentina, just make sure you're not wearing the rival club's colours, even if it's not a football shirt. If you're going to River Plate, don't wear anything blue. If you're going to Boca, don't wear anything red, because people don't like it. But I mean, what I would say from my travels is do speak to people while you're there and get to know people and improve your knowledge and learn about their club. But just be a little bit careful when it comes to ultras, because some of them don't take too kindly to people from the outside.
Yeah, you see, I'm going to say, every club I visited, even that of somewhere like St. Pauli, which we look at as being this very kind of progressive left-wing club, all of them, the ultras had a very similar dynamic, and you try to speak to any of them, and there was this sort of code of secrecy and this sort of almost outlaw mentality. So getting anything out of ultras at any of the clubs visited was, really difficult. It's a very kind of closed off world.
Well, this is it, because it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum they're on, they're wary of authority for different reasons. Yeah. So it's like, they don't want to be filmed because, they don't, they might not want people to know they're in an ultras group or whatever. So yeah, just be a little bit careful. Okay, so you went to Serbia. Where else did you head?
So from Serbia, I headed to Budapest, and that was a really fascinating experience. Obviously, Hungary is a country that is, plays a big part in football's history, particularly during the 50s with the Puskás era. And I went to Ferencváros, and that was just, an amazing experience. I talked about the atmosphere at Red Star, ranked up a few levels at Ferencváros. Really amazing match day atmosphere, and the stadium there as well. I don't know if you've seen it, but absolutely state of the art. Absolutely state of the art. They've got all this biometric technology there. It's a really stunning design. But again, Hungary is a country where the standard of living is not what it is in the UK. The average wage is way below what it is in the UK. But the cost of things is, not that different. So it's a difficult place to live. And, some of the few things that are affordable for working people in Hungary are beer, cigarettes, and football. And you see that in the way that people really embrace the game of football there. And, the atmosphere and the passion. It was a really, really memorable experience. Probably one of the best I've had anywhere.
Really? So yeah. What made it so memorable at that club in particular then?
I think the atmosphere was incredible, and just it's funny because you walk around Budapest, and there's some cities you can go to. I mean, Naples is the obvious one, but there's lots of cities you can go to. Even Leeds, where I live, where the local football club is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. You see the murals, you see the banners, you see the scouts up in shop windows. Budapest isn't really like that. You can walk around all day in Budapest, and there's no kind of evidence of football, but as soon as you get to the stadium, literally the metro station, there's 2 supporters pubs inside the metro station, and when you get there, just the outpouring of passion. I actually spoke to Robbie Keane while I was there. Robbie Keane's the manager. He's been manager at Ferencváros since January, And he was saying in the city centre, he said the passion there is unbelievable. And, people constantly come up to him and talking to him. They live for the football.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget Hungarians' passion for football in the sense that the clubs aren't as strong as they used to be, and the national team's not as strong as it once was, but a very important football nation, as I'm sure Jonathan Wilson would say, since he wrote a book about Hungarian football, which I've read, and I must say is very, very enjoyable book. I learned a lot about the history of Hungary and around that area. So you went to the Netherlands as well, didn't you? Well, you headed to, was it France you went to?
That was the last leg. So the last leg of the trip, I went to Decote to see Feyenoord against NAC. And again, brilliant experience. Much more similar, actually, to the kind of English fan experience. So you travel to other countries and you'll notice this, James. The ultras are barely watching the game. So there'll be someone on a podium directing the chants, and it's all pre-planned and it never stops from the first minute to the last. They carry on all game. And it's great, and it's a brilliant experience to be part of. But you've then got the English kind of support, which is kind of, I would say, more responsive. We're reacting to what's happening on the field. And I would say the Dutch, certainly in Feyenoord, less so in other places they've been, but certainly in Feyenoord, it's much more similar to that English culture. Even the songs are, you might not understand the words, but you know the tunes. And
it's supposed to be a really, really good atmosphere at Feyenoord. I mean, so for example, you have Amsterdam, which is, cafes and bikes and, feels like, very sort of, a very, very sort of like European ideal city, maybe quite bohemian. But then Rotterdam is like the working class port, so I could imagine it's reflected more in the football club that the atmosphere in De Kip is quite intense because the people are quite very different from Amsterdammers. Maybe like you could compare, say, Liverpool or Manchester or Leeds to, say, a London club, maybe.
There's an element of that, but actually, when you visit Rotterdam, and I'd not been there since I was tiny. My dad used to live in Rotterdam when I was a toddler. It doesn't quite fit the stereotype that you think it will. You're thinking you're going to get to this place, it's going to be really blue collar, it's going to be full of kind of burly dockers and all these kind of stereotyped ideas. It's a really cool place. It's full of really cool bars and cafes. It's quite an attractive city as well. It's not filled with tourists in the same way that Amsterdam is, but it's got a really good vibe. I think part of the reason for the atmosphere there is, it's an old ground, is Decote. They've done things to improve it, but the design, it sort of wraps in on it's like a bowl and just traps the noise there. And, I don't know. Some grounds just have that magical touch, don't they? I think that's one of them. I think partly through the stadium design, I think partly through the fan base. There's just something really special. Compared to other places as well, the fans were really inclusive. I was there, my pal met up with me to come to that game because he's another groundhopper. He'd never been to the crowd before, and he wanted to come, so he met me in Rotterdam just so he could come to the game. And there's certain places you go as an outsider, you kind of keep your head down, as you said earlier, and you kind of blend in. There, as soon as people spotted, oh, you've come from England? Brilliant. Let us buy you beers. And this was the experience we had. So, yeah, really surprising experience, but a really great one. And the nice thing is actually in the morning, I had a couple of hours spare, so I jumped on the tram and I went to Sparta. And again, brilliant club. No game that day. They were playing away at PSV at the same time as the Feyenoord game. But just bumped into a guy outside a shop, and I had a Bohemian Dublin shirt on. The guy outside the shop stopped me. Are you Irish? Are you English? Have you come here? And I kind of explained why I was there. He said, let me take you for a tour. And he went in the club shop and he had a word with the guy behind the counter, got the keys, gave me a full tour of the ground. And again, really great little stadium. And I'm definitely, he's told me already, you've got to come back. You've got to come watch Sparta play. So that's definitely another one for the list. Great city, though. If you ever get a chance to visit Rotterdam, very different to Amsterdam, but I would say in a good way.
Yeah, it's like I've not seen a game in the Netherlands yet, but I can imagine from what you're saying, sounds the fans very similar to how the fans are in Germany. The fans in Germany, I remember being at Cologne and me and my brother were just talking in the queue for a beer. And then it's just like, where are you from? Next thing you know, there was a crowd of about 15 people gathered around us, asking us questions, and telling us all about Cologne and etc. and wanting to know where else we were going. So I can imagine very similar. Well, they probably wouldn't like being compared to the Germans, the Dutch, for historical and political reasons. But yeah, I can imagine quite similar.
I did Ajax a year or two back. And again, really similar, really inclusive. The group of lads sitting behind us, as soon as they knew my son were English, they were sort of asking us questions and who do you support in England. You can still get a beer in your seat in the Netherlands. So they said, we're getting beers, you want a beer? And so very similar, but I would say the atmosphere at the Johan Cruyff Arena, and even Ajax fans I've spoken to since have kind of acknowledged that the atmosphere of the Johan Cruyff Arena at the moment is really flat. And I don't know if it's because the team haven't been perhaps performing. Maybe it's linked to the fact that in the Netherlands they did have quite a big problem with fan behaviour, and they've really clamped down on that, and they're limiting things like away travel. I don't know, but it's a really contrasting experience. And if you're only going to do one of the two, I'd say Feyenoord every day of the week.
Yeah, when I looked into it once, it seemed really, really difficult to get a ticket if you were English or British. But I don't know if that's changed. But I think a friend of mine might be responsible for that. But that's another story. I won't incriminate anyone on this podcast. But there was an incident a few years ago that I think led to there being a ban on English fans.
What I will say, if you've got any groundhoppers listening, I think, I could be wrong, but the second week in September, there's a day where Sparta are playing Excelsior. So that's a kind of mini Rotterdam derby. And that's a 12 o'clock kickoff. And then Feyenoord are at home in the evening. So if you're at a loose end and you want to get bang for your buck on a groundhopping trip, that's the one to do it. Get yourself to Rotterdam and catch 2 games in one day. And if you're lucky, you might even get a game on the Sunday somewhere else in the Eredivisie.
Sounds like a plan. And being a Bristol City fan, I'd recommend anyone get to Willem II because we got a friendship with them. Okay, so you've done you did Hungary, you did Serbia, the Netherlands. Where else?
So from Hungary, I got the overnight bus to Czechia. So I got in literally 24 hours. Got in Czechia in the morning, got into Prague, did a walking tour, ate some local food, and then went to Sparta Prague. And again, brilliant experience. Another experience where you didn't feel at all threatened. The fans there were very helpful, very friendly, because, and you find the way to the ground. The funny thing that happened there, they've obviously got quite a strong ultras culture in Czechia, and there's these kind of big murals on the back of the stand. And as I was making my way to get into the stand, I was stopped by the police and saying, "Are you English?" I'm like, "Yeah." Right, go to that table. And I thought, what's happening here? Am I not going to get in? And a lady at the table very politely had a look at my ticket and said, "I'm very sorry, these places are reserved for Czech hooligans." So she upgraded me and moved me to another section of the ground. But it was just, it's quite funny when you hear that word, these places are reserved for Czech hooligans, because the word in the UK has obviously got all these kind of negative connotations. In Europe, it's a kind of throwaway word. Even the club officials will talk about hooligans, but not in a kind of negative way. They see them as valuable to the club.
I think it's a translation problem. I mean, I think because there isn't such a thing as ultras in the UK. Then they just think, the UK word for ultra is hooligan. But of course, the difference is hooligans are just about the scrap, whereas the ultras it's a different dynamic and it's a different way of supporting. But I think, a lot of other countries just see the ultra translation as being hooligan. But it does sound funny.
They've appropriated that word, hooligan, and it's kind of a badge of honour now. And there's no getting away from it. There is some violence with the hooligan groups, not so much at the grounds. If you search the web, there's reports of these guys meeting up in farmers' fields and stuff to fight out, and ultra fight clubs and ultra MMA groups and all these sort of different things. But in the ground, the clubs, you can see they really value these guys because they really enhance the atmosphere there. back at Red Star, they've even got a souvenir shop at the ground. So you've got a Red Stars ground, and they've got a really nice sort of well set out official club souvenir shop. But then you walk across the way about 20 yards away, and there's an Ultras shop where you buy Ultras gear, and it's probably three times the size of the shop that the club wanted. So it's a different relationship. You see clubs here beginning to replicate, and it probably links what we were saying before about trying to fill that void that's been left with the atmosphere. But Crystal Palace, he's probably a good example with the Homesdale group. They are probably the closest, I would say, in the Premier League to a European style Ultras kind of culture.
So.
Yeah, and they're going the way, they're appropriating that European culture. But I did notice, they ran into problems at Wembley, didn't they, for the Charity Shield, and there were certain things they wanted to do that they weren't allowed to do. So, yeah, different context, I suppose. But, yeah, the Ultras at Sparta Prague, again, amazing, just built this fantastic atmosphere up. And again, you look at Ultras culture, and it's not the same in every country. There were elements of the Sparta match day experience that almost felt a little bit American. They've got a Spartan warrior who's sitting on standing on a platform, and there's plumes of smoke going up, and they've got a parade of flags on the pitch, and each flag, like huge flags, denoting a different supporters group. But again, brilliant experience. They were playing a team from Kazakhstan, so they brought a small travelling support. But you think, early stages of European qualification, it'd be a bit flat. Nothing of the sort. It was like going to a cup final. Okay, so even after the game, people probably didn't leave until maybe 15 minutes after the game. Sweet Caroline came on, and the whole place just went crazy. And yourself from Europe, it's quite typical for the team to sort of link arms and walk up to the Ultras section and join in with a chant at the end of the game. So again, though, brilliant match day experience. And again, it just if you're somebody who likes city breaks anyway, and a lot of people do, it just adds an extra element to your trip.
The thing about Czech Republic that's interesting is football's not actually the most popular sport there. They're all into ice hockey, and I've met a lot of people from the Czech Republic, and I asked them if they like football, and none of them like football, but they all loved ice hockey. So that's very, very odd in a European country, particularly Central Eastern Europe, where football's not the main sport, and that it's ice hockey. That's very, very odd, because most countries it is football.
It's funny, because speaking to people in Belgrade, a lot of them, when you speak to them, say, it's not a football country. This isn't a football, it's a basketball country. And the interesting thing is, obviously, in Europe, you've got these multi-sport club models. So, for example, in Czechia, like you mentioned, they've got an ice hockey section at Sparta. All the other big clubs have got ice hockey sections. In Bratislava, Slovakia, it's the same. In the sort of former Yugoslav republics, all of the big football clubs are linked to basketball clubs, and those clubs get massive support. And what's interesting, actually, is the crossover. So, again, if you have a look online at Instagram or whatever and look at Red Star Belgrade or look at any of the Croatian clubs playing basketball, it's the kind of football-style atmosphere. They've got the ultras, you can see the flares going off, you can see for all the rest of it. So there's a big crossover. But, yeah, a lot of people, a lot of the Serbian people I spoke to, it was like, no, this is a basketball country.
There we are. Serbian basketball, I didn't know that. So did you not head over to Ireland to watch a game? Because
May I went to Ireland, so I did a little cheeky trip. Flew into Belfast because it's a city I really enjoy visiting, and I wanted to go back and not been for a number of years. Visited Linfield with no game on there, but I wanted to go and see the stadium. Last time I'd worked there was when I was a journalist, so 25 years ago. And I wanted to see what that was like, and then got the train down to Dublin and went to see Bohemian FC play. And that was, again, pound for pound, brilliant experience. I think a lot of groundhoppers, when they're planning the trips, probably overlook Ireland as a destination, but there's something really special going on there. And what's great about it seems to be growing from the grassroots. And
I was gonna say, because like in a lot of people's minds, and particularly in mine, might be being very ignorant here, but is like you have this idea of football in Ireland as being completely a minority sport compared to the Gaelic sports. Then where football is popular, you have visions of ferry loads of Liverpool and Man United fans and Everton or whatever, Arsenal, Spurs, because of some of the Irish players that play for those clubs coming over and supporting English football. And you have like this kind of impression in your head of just these empty grounds during the summer in Ireland. But that's not the case now, is it? Is it really, the local teams are starting to become more popular with people there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, I think I'm right in saying some of the football clubs actually predate some of the GAA clubs. So the GAA, that organisation was kind of established to kind of strengthen that Irish identity. Some of the football clubs already existed. Bohemian, for example, were well in place. Cliftonville in Belfast, I think, is the oldest club in Ireland. I think that was in place before a lot of the GAA clubs. So the football culture was always there. Believe it or not, cricket at the end of the 19th century, massive in Ireland. Okay, so it's a big sport in Ireland. So that was there as well. I think what's changed in recent years, and when you speak to people out and about in Ireland, what's happened with the League of Ireland is COVID. So you had these thousands of people every single weekend, a lot of them season ticket holders, jumping on Ryanair flights from Cork, from Belfast, from Dublin, flying over to England, going to the game, coming back, and not really paying that much attention to what was going on back home. What happened with COVID was once they started slowly kind of removing the restrictions and allowing people out, they still couldn't fly necessarily, but they started that hunger to go to the football. And what a lot of these people did, certainly in Dublin, was started checking out the local team. And I think what they found when they got there was actually this is good, and the standard's much better than we expected. And he's kind of snowballed from there. And he's, these clubs play at relatively small grounds, but sellouts are quite common in the League of Ireland now. And the big Dublin derby, I think at the start of last season, they held it at the Aviva Stadium, and I think they drew a 40,000 gate. So it's really growing. But I think, again, what's appealing, it's so organic. You got a Bohemians ground, Dalymount. It used to be an international arena. The Republic of Ireland played games there.
Play there, yeah.
Yeah, up to maybe like 1989, 1990. The lads who run Bohemian won't be offended when we're saying it. It's seen better days. It's an old stadium, but it's covered in the most amazing murals and street art you'll ever see. It's a really atmospheric place. It's in the middle of a really nice neighbourhood in Dublin, Phibsborough, which, is only probably 15 minutes outside the city centre, but, you go there and it's half the price. You're not paying tourist prices like you are in the city centre, and it's surrounded with pubs. There's a real buzz about the place. And again, they've got a kind of ultras group there, the Notorious Boo Boys, so they create a real racket there. And yeah, it's just a brilliant match day experience. Really, really good. I couldn't recommend the League of Ireland enough to people. I think people would be really, really surprised. Not just at the experience, but the quality of play as well. It's a really good standard of football. And you're starting to get Premier League clubs picking up kids from the League of Ireland now. Edmund Ferguson's an obvious example. He was a Bows player, but there's more and more kids getting scouted from the League of Ireland.
Well, the good thing if you're a groundhopper and you can't have a summer break, I mean, me personally, I quite like it when the summer comes. Well, I don't live in the UK anymore, but I quite like it when the summer would come along because I could just go watch the cricket and forget about football. But if you're a groundhopper, the League of Ireland plays during the summer. So you can get to, if you're desperate to see a match, then you can get over there. And it's interesting you say about, Bohemians being, Cliftonville being old clubs. But I think, when Ireland was part of Britain, I think British sports like, football and cricket was a lot more acceptable then. Then, of course, the political situation changed. So I think then it was seen as the sports of the enemy or un-Irish. Do you know what I mean? And I think now that relations between the two nations are in a much, much better place than they were in the past. I think that's probably why, the interest is building there.
Yeah, there is that. And the other interesting thing with Bohemian as well is they are a very, we talked about clubs being political earlier. Bohemian are a very out and proud left-leaning club. They're a campaigning club. All over the ground, there's some amazing sort of pro-Palestine and free Palestine murals there that they've got. They have got an amazing kind of selection of replica shirts. I think they've put about 6 out this year, but often they'll do those from a charitable point of view. So they'll link up with trade unions. They'll link up the band Fontaine's DC and put one out this year. And a lot of that will be to support causes. They do a lot of work in the community, working with offenders and all sorts of other different things. And, there's a little cluster of clubs in Europe, Cardiff, not far from you, Bohemians, a couple in Italy, who all have this sort of left-leaning agenda, and Bohemian are definitely at the kind of forefront of that. They're picking up fans because of that in a similar way that perhaps St. Pauli did 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of clubs aligned to certain politics. So what would you say was the highlight of your trip, and what was the low point? Were there any low points?
I wouldn't say a low point, but I had my first ever visit to Munich, and I was really looking forward to it. And the city itself didn't disappoint. It's an amazing city. And then I went to the Allianz Arena, and I had to kind of couch this with the fact it was only a friendly. So the way the dates worked out, the only game I could get there was the Spurs friendly. And, if you saw that, but Spurs went there and kind of got rolled over 4-0. It's a really, really impressive arena. It's incredibly impressive. It looks absolutely state-of-the-art. You go in there, it's comfortable. It's got all those amenities that you get when you go to see a movie at the cinema. It's got all these things that fans seem to want today, and it's beautifully designed. Great facilities for disabled fans as well, which is really important. But even bearing in mind the fact it was a friendly, it just felt a little bit flat, a little bit corporate.
I think that could have been the fact it was friendly. I've been there twice, and the atmosphere was good both times. So I went to see 1860 Munich against Dusseldorf, and it was half full, but it was still noisy. It was only the bottom 2 tiers. The top tier was closed for that one. And I went to see Guardiola's Bayern against Hoffenheim. But the tickets were in the Hoffenheim section, because it was easier to get in the away section via Hoffenheim than it was because they don't have that many fans, than it was to actually buy a ticket in the home end with the Bayern fans. But the atmosphere there was good. So the thing is about Bayern is, so Bavaria as a region is traditionally very Catholic, very conservative. So the region tends to be, if you look at the, when there's elections in Germany, the Conservatives tend to run Bavaria, but Bayern Munich fans are very, very left wing. The ultras are very, very left wing, which people might not expect from a club as big as Bayern, and also a club from Munich. But that is the case. And there's also an interesting backstory with Bayern as well, is the fact that they were a Jewish club. Most of the directors were Jewish prior to the Third Reich and the war. And obviously, sadly, a load of those people didn't make it through the Holocaust. So, Bayern has, Bayern did have an element of being a bit of a middle class club. And 1860 being more of the working class club, but its ultras have certainly aligned themselves with the left. They're often protesting about the way the league and the German authorities are dealing with football fans. So, even though Bayern feels like the establishment club, the ultras certainly aren't very anti-establishment for, a region of Germany that generally tends to be, wealthy, conservative in general. So it is interesting, but the Allianz Arena is just a great stadium.
Obviously, and even for a friendly, there was, I think, 64,000 in there. So, probably about 9,000 off being a full house. So it's an incredible arena. It's obviously, way out of the town centre, which So
The only downside, yeah.
yeah, it limits the match day experience a little bit for me. I like grounds that are there in the centre and there's a pub on the corner and all the rest of it. But no, it's incredible. I think my abiding memory, though, I had a few hours spare in the morning, so I got on the metro. I visited the Manchester United Memorial, Manchester Platz, and then I went to 1860. And 1860, I've obviously moved back to the old ground, which is back in the old suburb that the club, or the old district that the club sprang up from. And that place is pretty run down and pretty concrete, but I'm looking and thinking, I really want to come to a game here.
Yeah, they both used to play there, them and Bayern. Yeah. And Bayern Reserves play there. So it's 1860 play there and Bayern Reserves. So yeah, both clubs still use that ground, but the first team have one, the reserves of the other. But that, until Bayern moved to the Olympic Stadium in 1970, that was their home ground. The pair of them used to share it. It's interesting. I mean, some listeners may know, some might not. But in the 1960s, 1860 were the club of Munich, and Bayern were the smaller of the two. In fact, Bayern weren't founder members of the Bundesliga. Bayern weren't deemed as a big enough club to be founder members, and this is 1964, so that's not that long ago, in relative terms. And I think it was a case of Bayern had a very good group of players that came through the academy, like Sepp Maier, Franz Beckenbauer, who was an 1860 fan, but didn't want to play for 1860 because he was punched by an 1860 player during a youth match. So he was like, I can't be a teammate of this guy. So he signed for Bayern instead. And then you've got Gerd Müller, the legendary German striker. He's from Nuremberg, which is also in Bavaria, but he's from Nuremberg, and he was a Nuremberg fan. He just wanted to play for Nuremberg, and they looked at him and they said, we don't think you're good enough. So he was rejected by Nuremberg, picked up by Bayern, and Nuremberg had more titles than Bayern when Gerd Müller was signed by them, but Bayern overtook that back in the early 90s. So Nuremberg, Bayern, I wouldn't say got lucky, but Bayern were fortunate to have a group of players that all came through the academy. Some were rejected, some didn't want to play for the other team, due to various personal vendettas. So and also move into the Olympia Stadion in 1970. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the two clubs went in different paths, and that was the same kind of in Liverpool to a certain degree with the arrival of Shankly, and a little bit in Manchester with the arrival of Busby, because I think City were ahead of United until Busby, Everton until Shankly, but then the tables turned, and a similar thing happened in Munich. So it just goes to show that these sliding doors moments can change the course of history.
Yeah, I'd say one big contrast in Germany as well. From Munich, I got another overnight train to Dortmund. Now, I knew I couldn't catch a game in Dortmund. The logistics didn't work, but I really, really wanted to visit. So I had this awful kind of overnight 7-hour train journey just to get a few hours in Dortmund, just to give me the opportunity to visit the ground. And I know you've been to Westfalen Stadium, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even walking, and I'm not a fan of visiting empty stadiums particularly. For me, a stadium, it's just a building until you get people in it. But even walking around that empty, and even standing in the yellow wall when it's empty, it's got a real aura. And it's not as modern as the Allianz Arena, but for me, the place has got a real aura. And as soon as I get the opportunity, I'll be flying out there and getting to a game there.
Yeah, the thing about Dortmund is a huge stadium, holds 80,000, but it feels like a football ground.
It doesn't feel like a huge stadium as well. When you look at those things, you think, really? 80,000? But, the yellow wall on its own holds 25, I think, doesn't it, all standing?
Yeah. I've stood on there, and it's fantastic. And in a funny kind of way, it's a bit weird because it was a great experience standing on the yellow wall. But then I'd like to return and sit somewhere else to see the yellow wall, because when you're actually a part of it, you don't actually get to see it. I mean, I've seen it on TV, but I'd like to see the yellow wall from the other end, maybe. I bought a ticket on a ticket resale site because I wanted to go on the yellow wall. This was in 2011. This is when Klopp Klopp, the first title he won with Dortmund, and the ticket arrived from Berlin. I paid 75 quid for it because I wanted to stand on the yellow wall. I made an exception, and I think the face value price of the ticket was €8. So it's like I got ripped off there, but yeah, it's a fantastic experience. Dortmund is a football city. I mean, I'm sure any Dortmunder who are listening to this wouldn't be offended to say Dortmund's not the most attractive of cities because it was heavily damaged during the war. It's an industrial city, but this adds to the mystique and the passion for Borussia Dortmund because the club is the focus of that city, and it's a working class city. It's the brewing capital of Germany, so it is where they make the beer and also steel working and stuff like that. So it really is the industrial heartland, working class part of Germany. And I think that adds to the special atmosphere that you get at Dortmund. It's a real football city.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they call it the German capital city of football, don't they? And as soon as you come out of the train station, shops are covered in yellow and black. The kebab shop is painted up in yellow and black. Right opposite the train station, you've got the National Football Museum. And you speak to people there, and I spoke to them at the club, what else is there to do in Dortmund? And even, the young woman who's working around a counter club goes, nobody comes to Dortmund except for football. So he's kind of that place, but yeah, he's somewhere I'll definitely have to get back to.
Yeah, what is there to do in Dortmund? Watch BVB and drink beer.
Basically, he'd go into the tourist information office, and I said, I'm here for the day. What is there to do? And she kind of looks at me quizzically and said, oh, well, there's a lake and there's a brewery. I said, is there anything else? And she kind of drew a blank then. So, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't get to go for a romantic weekend, but definitely somewhere to go and watch the football.
No, but I can say from personal experience that just going to a match or just going into bars and having a beer with people from Dortmund is great because they're super friendly, they're super nice, and they absolutely love football. So if you want a good football weekend, Dortmund's brilliant for that. You won't see any art galleries, but you'll meet some really nice people, have a few beers, and have a nice football chat, which is always good. Okay then, Rob. So what are your future plans? What trips have you got lined up?
So I'm hoping to get a trip to Scandinavia. Obviously, the Swedish are like the Irish, they play a summer season, so I really want to catch a game in Sweden before the season's over. And if I can, I'm going to double it up. Maybe do Malmo and FC Copenhagen, because obviously, you've got 20 minutes commute between those two grounds, so that's easy done. And then with the book in mind, I've got a trip sort of provisionally planned to Morocco for October half term. So I'll be looking to do that, and I'll go and see one of the big, probably one of the big Casablanca clubs. And if the schedule matches as well, I'm going to try and get to Ceuta, just purely for the novelty value. So Ceuta play in La Liga 2, but it's in mainland Africa. It's a little Spanish enclave in Morocco. So if I can, I'm going to try and head over there and get a game there as well. But again, the difficult thing is, with football trips, particularly seems to be worse with the Spanish clubs, is it's a bit of a moving feast. So you can book to arrive somewhere on one date and then it's been moved at fairly late notice for television or whatever reason. So that's the plan anyway.
Okay, all sounds good. I might join you in Morocco. Who knows if I'm free that weekend. Okay, so Rob, where can people follow you on social media, etc.?
Okay, so when I agreed the deal to put the book out, I decided to create some social media channels. So I've got channels on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at the moment. So if you look for the Global Groundhopper, and you'll see the label is kind of stylized, ultra label. He's got his face covered, and he's got glasses and a bucket hat. You'll find it there. So yeah, Global Groundhopper. And what I'm actually doing is when I'm traveling to places, researching for the book, I'm recording videos as well. So I do little travel hubs. So there's one going out later today about Dortmund as it happens. But yeah, all the places I visit, I put out travel logs, and I've got a little network of people now as well who provide me with content. So we try and, broaden the kind of geographic footprint. So we put one out the other day about other red diamonds in the J League. So that's out there as well. So anyone who's interested in kind of looking different grounds around the world, or maybe want some travel tips in terms of how to get to places, go to the Global Groundhopper. And if you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments section and I can advise as best I can.
Okay, cool. So listeners, that's all we want to do. Check out the Global Groundhoppers, and maybe you might get some ideas for some trips that you might want to do yourself. Okay, that's it for today's episode of the Football Culture Podcast. Do subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platforms. Tell your friends. Follow us on social media, the Football Culture Podcast. That's on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, on everything, TikTok. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.